Hey guys, welcome into the 14. I'm Nick Cole. We're breaking down each SEC football game in Week 12 from a betting perspective. Today, we're talking about the Arkansas Razorbacks visiting the Alabama Crimson Tide. This game's going to be played on Saturday, November 20th, and it's going to be at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It'll be televised on CBS. From a betting perspective, this game opened with Alabama as a 22-point favorite. That line's moved to 20.5 as of the recording of this video. The over-under opened at 56.5, and it has moved up to 58.5 as of Thursday afternoon. I'll bring in our betting analyst, Christopher Smith. Christopher, this is probably the game of the week in the SEC with a lot of teams going out of conference before rivalry week. What do you think about this SEC West clash?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it to be close at the end, but then again, Nick Saban said his team had the poor me's in practice yesterday, I believe. So we'll see. Maybe Alabama's not too focused, but we'll find out. Hopefully, it's a good game. But why don't you tell us about the weather, injuries, and get into Nick's news and notes?
Sure. So let's start with the weather for Tuscaloosa on Saturday afternoon. We've got temperatures in the 60s, no rain in the forecast, and wind should be about 6 to 8 miles per hour. So it should be a good, clean track to bet on. From an injury standpoint, there's really nothing new for the Razorbacks coming into this game. They're in pretty good shape. And then on the Alabama side of things, the highlight there is running back Roydell Williams had knee surgery. So he's going to join Jace McClellan and Kamar Wheaton on the sideline this week. The Tide has been thin at running back behind Brian Robinson most of the year, and it seems to be getting worse as the season goes on. Center Darian Dalcourt, wide receiver / punt returner JoJo Earl, and safety DeMarco Helms are three other players to monitor going into this game. They need to check on Saturday to see if they're going to play or not. Earl's probably out for sure out of those three. News and notes side of things. Let's start with Arkansas, and let's just say the Hogs are streaking with the boot in hand. Okay, they give them credit. They went down to Baton Rouge in Week 11 and pulled out an overtime win in Tiger Stadium, which at night, even when LSU is not playing at its best, is a tough thing to do. So after that victorious Saturday night, they're now back in the top 25. They're on a 3-game winning streak, and they're on their way to Tuscaloosa, where winning streaks go to die, right? And so that brings me to the next point to talk about is Alabama and sort of their dominance, specifically in this series. They're 14-0 against Arkansas under Nick Saban. And of course, the Tides won 60 of their last 62 games at Bryant-Denny Stadium. So when you combine those two things together, realize Arkansas hasn't won at Alabama since 2003. And like I said, they got a little bit of an uphill battle ahead of them if they're wanting to pull this upset. Speaking of the Tide, let's talk about what they did in Week 11. They finished their final non-conference game of the season, and they really, truly could have named the score against New Mexico State. It was 59-3, which is really convenient for those of us, you and I, Christopher included, who bet the under 67 and also said they'd lay the 51 on the Crimson Tide. Both of those were correct picks. So we picked that right, but really the Tide could have scored 65, 70 points if they wanted to. It was a call off the dog situation early in that game, and they just sort of ran out that clock. So, Christopher, when we go look to bet as they get back into conference play, you see Arkansas surging a little bit, looking more like that team that they were in September maybe, and then Alabama seems to have it on cruise control at this point. How do we bet a game with a line like this?
This is actually a very good matchup for Alabama and a bad matchup for Arkansas. Like, you know, when you're talking about betting, what a lot of smart bettors do, and like a lot of people do with markets in general, is assume that for the most part, the market is efficient. And now, you know, no market is perfectly efficient. And even in college football betting in 2021, you know, it's not like the most liquid market in the world, but you kind of start out assuming like the general masses, the odds makers, the people betting into the lines, that at least by late in the week, like the line is pretty good. And so you're kind of looking for what may not be reflected in the line. What may you kind of assume, like from a numbers perspective, the line is going to be pretty good. So what may not be reflected in the numbers. And this is a good example where if you look at projections and the numbers and how good are these two teams, then, you know, Alabama a little bit, maybe half a point under -21 is probably a pretty good number for this game. But if you look at the actual matchup, you know, this is an Arkansas defense that ranks near the bottom of the SEC in sacks, ranks near the bottom of the SEC in tackles for loss, in terms of the yards, especially. And they sag off the ball. They're 8th in 20+ yard plays allowed. So they don't come at you aggressively. They sit back and say, we're going to keep everything in front of us. We're going to prevent the big play. They play a lot of 3-down linemen. So what does that mean? It means a couple of things. First, it means that you're going to be able to run the ball pretty well on Arkansas. And it's a carbon copy of Ole Miss, right? That Ole Miss ripped off the Arkansas defense last year. So you're going to be able to run the ball on Arkansas when they have 3-man fronts and they're dropping people deep into coverage. Second of all, what does Bryce Young and Alabama do with their skill players really well? They complete throws, short, intermediate throws, and they allow their athletes to try to make plays after the catch. And Arkansas is going to let you have those throws all day. I mean, they're not going to like just allow you to catch every pass, but they're not playing to break up those passes. They're playing to prevent you from going over the top and making an explosive play. So if you look at the Alabama Ole Miss game, I know Ole Miss missed a lot of 4th downs, but that was 42-7 at one point in that game. Alabama was ahead at home. And now they're playing Arkansas, a carbon copy of the Ole Miss team, and you're getting a line that's less than 3 touchdowns. So the other side of the ball, basically Arkansas can do they run the ball 65% of the time. And their pass offense is basically Treylon Burks, and that's it. Now, Treylon Burks is a great receiver. He may be a first-round NFL player, but they want to run the ball. They want to run with KJ Jefferson, their big quarterback, and a bunch of their running backs. If Alabama gets a lead in this game and forces them to pass, that doesn't bode well for the Razorbacks at all, especially if Alabama just puts a safety over the top of Burks on every snap. And especially if Alabama sends Will Anderson in the pass rush after Jefferson as well. So I think if Alabama gets a lead, Arkansas is 67th in pass offense EPA per snap and 86th in passing down sack rate. So the game script here, if it doesn't start well for Arkansas, like we saw in the Georgia game, Arkansas really needs to get a lead or do something early, or else it's going to be a game script that's going to go very badly for them. So Nick, who are you betting on in this game, and tell us why?
Well, first, let me, Christopher, give our audience a chance to get some extra money to bet on this game. We have a partnership with Action 24/7 Sportsbook, and they've got a special deal for new customers that I want to tell you about. For a limited time, you can get your deposit matched 100% up to $800. So sign up today, make your first deposit using the code SOUTH14, that's SOUTH14, and Action will double your money for up to $800. Download the app or visit action247.com to get things started. Action 24/7 is by Tennesseans for Tennesseans, and you've got action. So my action on this game, I actually have a little bit of trouble envisioning the game script for this game. I feel like Arkansas has been playing better recently, so I'm going to take the Hogs plus 20.5 for the purposes of our picks. If I were actually betting my money on this game, which I really haven't decided on just yet, I would hope to get 21 or maybe even 21.5 if I could shop around a little bit and find it. What I do like on this game is I like the under 58.5 if I'm following that Arkansas game script. So I don't think they're going to get in a run and gun type of game and keep up with Alabama. It's going to have to play a little bit of defense, have to control the ball, you have to be able to run the ball successfully, and be able to stop Alabama running the ball. There'd be a little bit of depth issues at running back, and maybe that's a spot where they haven't had great success at times this season. But if they're going to stay in this game, I think that's a key for them too. So that's my picks. How do you view this one?
I expect a lot of Brian Robinson running the ball in this game, and a lot of John Mechie, who has become sort of that short underneath receiver for Alabama this year. And I do think Arkansas is going to force Alabama to sustain long drives and long clock running drives with running the ball and completing short passes in order to score and kind of toughen up in the red zone. And on the other side of the ball, I think if Alabama gets a lead, it's going to be tough for Arkansas to do anything on offense, because Alabama is going to know your only shot is throwing to Treylon Burks over and over again. And if you just devote a lot of attention to him and coming after the passer, then I don't really know that Arkansas is going to be able to do much at all on offense. So I agree with you. I do like the under 58.5. I would say it's probably my favorite bet on this game if I had to pick -1. But I do also like Alabama at anything less than -21. Nick, you made a good point, just kind of shopping for the right number, depending on which side you want to be on in this game. But for Nick Cole, I'm Christopher Smith for the 14, and we'll talk to you next week.